welcome to Too Many Movies, the podcast where we discuss DVDs, Blu-rays, and even the occasional VHS tape. I'm your host, Tal, and with me here today, Puff. Hello.
Meowdy. Hi.
Oh, Puff, welcome back. It's part 3. This is our third Dune episode. We have been Duning very hard.
This is the end game now.
This is the end game now.
At least until 2027.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is, like, I believe this might be the last Dune episode for a while, because, like, I have no idea if they're gonna make a Dune 3, but, you know what? Semantics.
No, it's been greenlit. It's been greenlit for a 2027 release.
Oh, has it been doing that well recently? The part 2? Is that
No,
why?
that was before part 2 came out.
That was before part 2.
Yeah, that got greenlit before part 2 came out. I guess it did that well in test screenings or something.
I guess so. Listen, I'm just being pessimistic as possible because
I mean, yeah, let's be real, because Warner Brothers doesn't give a shit about their movies. So yeah. I get, like, wanting to take a grain of salt. But I feel like with Dune, there might be a bit more of a chance that it gets by, considering the cultural landmark that it seems to be right now.
Right, yeah.
So I feel like if Dune Messiah wasn't made, it would not look good. But honestly, I don't even think Zaslav will be a CEO for that long.
Yeah,
like, considering
exactly.
the investigations from, like, the DOJ over Coyote versus Acme, like, he's getting sacked one way or the other.
Yeah, 2027, I doubt he'll be there at that point. But you know what? Come back to this episode in 2027. We'll see where we're at. Yeah,
we'll see if we're right.
Yeah,
maybe I can see into the future, actually.
Ah, just like that one character in that one movie.
Yeah, kind of crazy.
Yeah. So, as we said, this is our third Dune episode. This has been, a long time coming. I remember when we originally planned this trilogy of ours to have, like, because we were hoping this episode would come out in November when part 2 was originally supposed to come out. But that didn't end up happening. But you know what? I will say, if part 2 didn't get pushed back, we probably wouldn't have had the miniseries episode. We probably wouldn't have included Jodorowsky's Dune. Like, I feel like I still was able to discover new versions of Dune in a kind of backwards way, where with Dune 2 being pushed back. I was still pissed, but I feel like there were some positives to come out of it, I will say. But we've already talked about the David Lynch film. I just want to mention, though, recently, within the past couple of weeks, it was re-released in theaters for its 40th anniversary, and I went and saw it in theaters, and it still sucks, but man, there was something pretty special about hearing the Toto score on the big screen.
And I'm sure, like, being around other people, like, while watching it was also probably loads of fun. Like, that's my favorite part of going to physical movie theaters.
I did walk in, and there was a lot more older people than younger people in that theater. So I was definitely on the younger side of that theater experience, which, makes sense.
Makes sense.
So the other thing I want to mention that I did rewatch is I rewatched the miniseries.
Hell yeah.
On the actual DVD that I own it on. This was the first time. I will say I'm kind of annoyed with this DVD in the sense that there are absolutely zero subtitles. So that annoyed the hell out of me. So I'm, like, kind of wondering if I want to upgrade to a nicer Blu-ray just so then I can have the option for subtitles. But rewatching it, regardless, it belongs in the collection. I was like, okay, this has definitely justified my choice because you've converted me. I really like this miniseries.
Space.
Yeah. So, and I feel like I think rewatching this miniseries definitely helped with not just deciding that I really like it on its own, but it really got me to be a little more introspective on the movies we're talking about in today's episode. I feel like this is a long intro, but it's to set up the fact that there's a lot to talk about with Denis Villeneuve's Dune films, which are the subject of today's episode. Because I feel like had I not seen the miniseries, and my only idea of what Dune was the Lynch film, going into these Villeneuve movies, I'd be like, oh yeah, these are flawless masterpieces. They're the best things ever. But I feel like, even though I really like the Villeneuve films, I think I can safely say I really do like them, even and even love them. I would say they're some of my favorite films of the 2020s already. I will say I do have criticisms for them, because there's just some things that these movies do that I think I'm going to side with you on. I'm not sure if I like these changes, you know?
Yeah. For those who haven't seen my Letterboxd review, when I watched it, I noticed some changes. Like, because there's actually a lot of changes in part 2, which we'll get to when we get there. Mm-hmm. And I was disappointed, honestly. Mm-hmm. Like, there were some things that I've warmed up on a little, like the more I've thought on it as its own story rather than as an adaptation, because I try to do that when it comes to adaptations. But there's just some things that I feel like rob any future adaptations of something like, say, Children of Dune, for instance. Mm-hmm. And the way they set up specifically Alia, I just did not like, but we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, anyways, it's a very different beast from what's in the second part of the book.
Absolutely, yeah. But I feel like, even though I do have mostly positive things to say about part 2, I did realize watching it, I've only seen it once, and I've realized that I think it takes a couple watches for a lot of these movies and miniseries for me to truly appreciate and understand what it's doing. So I guess that means I'm gonna have to rewatch the Children of Dune miniseries at some point, but I don't want to. But I guess I
don't blame you.
All right, we've gone on long enough. I feel like we should definitely jump right into the actual movies. So let's start with Dune Part 1, the 2021 film. How do you want to start? How do you want to tackle this, first of all? Dune 2021.
I'm trying to think of like the best way to like. I feel like the big thing about the Villeneuve Dunes specifically is just how visually striking and gorgeous they are.
Oh, like, incredibly so.
They are very, like, well-made worlds. Like, every scene, every building looks well, like, you know, like, they look lived in. They look like real places. Oh, yeah. I remember I was seeing, like, this, like, behind-the-scenes thing on Twitter where apparently they used sand as a blue screen for certain shots, and they were like putting in like that one scene when the courtyard, and I don't know why I thought that it was like a sound stage at the very least, but no, they added a lot of that stuff in like the where all the like trees are lined up, the fig trees.
Yeah, the fig trees.
Like that was like added in post apparently, and I'm like, what the fuck? That's insane. Yeah, I could have sworn that was a sound stage or something. Like. It was incredibly, it blew my mind, honestly. I really need to, like, snag the Blu-rays for both and just dissect the bonus features. Also, I just want to mention as an aside, when I was watching Dune Part 1 the other night, my girlfriend walked in and they were like, babe, you're addicted to rewatching Dune. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, your point.
Yeah. No,
I did explain that Dune 2 was coming out.
So right, exactly. We have a reason, but at the you know, yeah, you are addicted. But that,
considering how many times I rewatched it last year.
I mean, to be fair, we've watched various different versions of this story. Like, I feel like I know it inside and out, but also not really, because I'm still discovering new things. You know, so like, yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint. But
this is where I convert you to reading the books.
I know. I'm more so considering it now than I ever have, which is huge. But it's just because of how much there is to this story. But yeah, one thing specifically about the Villeneuve film, especially the first one, is, you know, when I remember watching it in theaters for the first time and just being like, okay, like, this is what an evolution of a medium should be. Like, you know, I feel like for years we've kind of had this idea in our head that, you know, we're trying to wonder like when will movies start to look like more impressive? Like, you know how like for years people have like talked about like Lord of the Rings looking impressive, and like how we're waiting for like the next evolution of CGI looking really real. And then we get movies like Marvel movies, which don't. So
Yeah.
I feel like when I was watching this, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely watching something special here. Like, holy shit, the effects. They're so good. Like, even rewatching it, this is like, I've watched it 3 times now, this movie. And even on a smaller screen, the effects hold up really, really well. And the scale is still felt, even though I'm not watching it on a big screen anymore. I'm watching it on a smaller television, but I can still feel the grand scale of these planets and these spaceships. Like, it's just really impressive.
Yeah, no, it is like incredibly impressive. Like, I also like, how do I put it? The costume design also is like really solid with
Yes.
how like they adapted to like the specific like regions and like aesthetics of different planets and stuff like that. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't like it as much as the silly hats from like the miniseries, but that's like purely aesthetic bias because I
Right.
love that Y2K sci-fi look.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like the general like costuming, I do think it is like very good.
Yeah.
I have seen some like things about like cultural appropriation with them, and in some cases I agree, but in some cases I also think it's supposed to make you a little uncomfortable to see white women dressing like that. Like, the cultural appropriation is part of the narrative, not like part of the intent of
Right.
like it's not like malicious intent in terms of like the person who's making it. It's like this is like within the world supposed to make you uncomfortable because that's what's happening.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no. And I agree. I think tonally, I think the costume design matches what the movie's going for. Like, it's definitely going for a far more serious interpretation of the story. We've talked about how like the Lynch film is goofy, but it was trying to be serious. It just failed spectacularly. And then the miniseries was being serious, but it had like a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek nature to it. So like it was able to like kind of, it was kind of able to combine the serious and the silly a lot better. Whereas here, this is just straight up silly. This is straight up serious.
Yeah,
not
no
silly.
disallowed.
I mean, you get the occasional joke.
But like not anything all that like
no, it's more so character-based humor, not so much like the absurdity of something. Like, you're not, I mean, it's funny watching the Bene Gesserit like in their costumes, but you're not laughing at them. Like, it's a thought in your head where you're just like, oh, that's silly looking, but you're still taking it seriously.
Yeah, no, exactly. Although, I actually think that Bene Gesserit design in the miniseries goes hard. Like, I'm like probably the one person that like thinks it unironically goes hard.
No, I love them. I love the mouse ears hat and the cowgirl hats. I think those are funny. They're very unique. But I do feel like those would not match well in Villeneuve's films. So I feel like
absolutely
it makes sense the way the Bene Gesserit look in these films, where it's just like dark black cloaks.
I also want to mention nothing's ever really topped the glowing blue eyes from the miniseries for me.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing really ever has. Like, you know how a bunch of Dune adaptations will usually bring certain things they liked from other Dune adaptations?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't they have brought those over? It was literally just UV contact lenses.
Yeah.
Like,
or at least make the shade of blue darker. Like, I feel like
it looks like regular eyes unless you're like looking hard enough.
Yeah, I definitely felt as though like, I definitely need, because that's the point of the blue eyes, they're supposed to be striking. You're supposed to, like, when you see these blue eyes for the first time, you're just like, whoa, like, that's different. Like, that's the point. Whereas like here, you can tell that something's been like changed in editing, but like, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it should have been darker, like darker blue. Like, I feel like that would have been more striking.
Actually, maybe not darker blue per se, but something actually brighter, like something
Sure.
that like is very like clearly like inhuman, because
more defined. Yes.
in some shots it doesn't even look like they have blue eyes. Like
No.
even though it's obvious, even though if you look closely, like it's edited,
Mhm.
it just looks like a normal person.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the blue eyes in the miniseries are basically as good as they could look in a Dune adaptation. I mean, with that said, I feel like now's the point. Now that we're starting to talk about Dune 2021, I feel like I can start to like kind of come to the conclusion of which characters I prefer in which version.
Oh yeah.
Because I think a lot of characters, because I feel like that's something I've learned throughout watching all these different adaptations of Dunes, is like there's a lot of important characters, and if you don't do them correctly, you get very disappointed. So it's very important for certain characters to get it right. I think, well, let's start with the big one, Paul Atreides. I like Timothy Chalamet, or I just recently learned it's apparently Timothée Chalamet, because he's French. I know. No, I'm not calling him Timothée.
Fuck the French.
Yeah, I'm calling him Timothy. I'm calling him Timmy Turner. Timmy Turner Chalamet. I like him, but I think Alec Newman, the guy in the miniseries, has grown on me as my favorite Paul.
Really? I'm actually surprised.
I know. I don't remember if I said I didn't like it. I don't remember saying I hated his
No, you never
interpretation.
said you hated him. I'm just like genuinely surprised because Timothy's performance is incredible in both Dune movies.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, no, I feel like, I don't know. I do see Timothy Chalamet in this role.
That is fair. That is fair. Where like with Alec Newman, you see Paul. I feel like that is like the issue with how stacked the cast is in the Villeneuve Dune movies.
Yeah.
It's harder for me to see them as characters and more like, oh shit, hi Oscar Isaac, how's it going, hottie?
I do like Oscar Isaac as Leto.
Yeah, he is a very good Leto.
Yeah. This is not to say that Timothy Chalamet doesn't do a good job. Like, he fits Paul very well. Like, he is that like kind of awkward teenager character. And then he eventually uses those strengths into part 2. I think what it is that by the end of part 2, I still see Timothy Chalamet, whereas like with Alec Newman in the miniseries, I can see like a general change in character. Like, he does not look the same as when he started at the beginning of the miniseries. Like, he's a completely different character, and I like seeing that. It's like, oh, this guy went on an odyssey. Whereas with here, it's kind of just Timothy Chalamet the whole way through. It's good, don't get me wrong, but I just prefer, the miniseries.
Yeah, that's completely valid. I feel you with that. I actually prefer the Jessica in the miniseries to the Jessica in Dune, the Villeneuve Dunes. I mean, obviously I've said the Baron, but we won't get into that.
Well, I guess just because we can get into the Baron, I just want to mention that Jessica. Yeah. I think I would have preferred this Jessica, but after Dune 2, and we'll get into that. But yeah, I think I do prefer Jessica in the miniseries as well. But I think she does a good job in this one too.
Oh no, she does an absolutely wonderful job. Like, people have been praising her performance all over Twitter. Like, I think she did an amazing job.
Yeah, I don't think
it's just personal preference.
I think with most characters in the Villeneuve films, like, I think these versions I do like. Like, I do like Oscar Isaac as Leto. I love Gurney I love Josh Brolin as Gurney. This is my favorite Duncan Idaho. I'm just gonna say that. Like, Aquaman.
Yeah. Aquaman, Duncan Idaho, best Duncan Idaho.
I finally got a good Duncan Idaho, because like he's obviously he sucks in the Lynch film because he doesn't do anything, and then in the miniseries he's also just kind of there. Like, I don't remember him doing that much. He wasn't as bad upon rewatch, but considering that he's supposed to have a relationship with Paul, I buy it more in the Villeneuve film. So
exactly.
Yeah. I do really like this Dr. Yue. I think because he is, I think what I was like really debating this with trying to figure out how I feel about Dr. Yue, because I feel like in concept, I think Dr. Yue is a really cool character. It's just the Lynch film fucks him up. The miniseries is fine.
Doesn't really focus on him at
but
all, honestly.
yeah. Whereas with Villeneuve, it also doesn't really focus on him, but I feel like that kind of adds to it because you don't see it coming. Like, it's a genuine twist. Now, when I watched Part 1, when I originally watched it, I knew what was going to happen because I was familiar with the Lynch film. I was familiar with Dune, the story. So I'm like, when like Dr. Yue came on screen, I'm like, oh, he's going to betray them. So like here, it's like a genuine twist. Whereas in the Lynch film, you know, the characters know. No, not the characters know. The audience knows because it spells it out for them. So there's not really any tension, you know?
Admittedly, to be fair, in the book, the readers do know that Yue is the traitor. There are actually entire sections of the book dedicated to Yue's personal like feelings of guilt and betrayal towards the Atreides, and like that he hates what he's doing and all that kind of shit. Right. And it actually really hits hard when you read it, and it adds to the tension rather than takes away from the twist. But considering how jam-packed Dune Part 1 is, for being a 2-hour and 30-minute movie, and it still feels like it's rushing by the seat of its pants to adapt it as well as it can, I can understand taking that out entirely and just leaving Yue as like a twist. Like, I think that still works very well. Yeah.
And I still feel like his genuine disappointment and guilt still comes across in the actor's performance. Honestly,
oh yeah, absolutely.
I think Yue is just a weird character to adapt because like you said, there's so much to this character that, you know, you can't really get it all into cinema. And I probably would have loved Yue in the original Lynch film because I really like the actor Dean Stockwell. It's just, you know, it's the Lynch film. I don't need to explain why that doesn't work. Yeah, but you know what? Let's talk about the Baron, because I feel like after rewatching all three versions and leading up to Dune 2021, I used to be really into Stellan Skarsgård's performance. I still am, but I am Team Ian McNeice. Like,
let's go.
Yeah, you've converted me. So
he's so good. He's just fun
good
to watch. He chews up the scenery in the best way possible. Like, it's so dramatic and like very like camp, and I just adore. I adore his performance. Like, Stellan Skarsgård is like great. Don't get me wrong, but it's such a different portrayal of the Baron than we've seen in like anything. And honestly, I'm gonna be real. I feel like, in my opinion, in the book, the Baron still kind of had a sense of humor. Like, it was dark and twisted, but he had one. This one's very serious. I'm always going to be taking a bath.
Yes. Honestly, for that alone, I respect Stellan Skarsgård for taking such a goofy character and concept, this fat man that's always floating around, and making him terrifying. Like, that in and of itself.
Yeah, I do respect that a lot.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think he does a really good job. I think I like him more in this one than in Part 2. We'll get to that, but I think in Part 1 is when he definitely shines the most. I
agree.
But with that said, like I said, I think I do prefer the miniseries version because there is that balance. There is that better balance of being goofy while also still being just as cunning and manipulative. Because that's the thing. In the miniseries, the Baron is very schemy, whereas like in the movie, you're told that he's schemy. Like, oh, these are all his plans, like playing out.
Yeah, that is something that I noticed too. Like, I felt like the Harkonnens really just didn't feel as much of a threat.
No, yeah, they look awesome, but yeah, I don't feel as if it definitely feels as though it's a lot more obvious they're the villains because they're just like, oh, there's these big bald people with like black suits and they live on this planet called Gidi Prime and it's dark and depressing and it's all visually amazing, but I don't get any of that like schemy stuff. I will say it kind of wins me over in the second part in a way, but we'll get to part 2. Yeah. There's a lot, but what are some are there any changes in part 1 that you don't like right off the bat?
Honestly, part 1 is a pretty straightforward adaptation, actually. There weren't too many changes. To the overall story. It was mainly things getting omitted, like the dinner scene, which is very popular. Like there's also the scene with the green room, but they kind of the fig tree thing is in the books. It was like that and the green room. But I guess they were just like, we're gonna pick one, and this one seems more fitting to the themes that we're going to be focusing on this adaptation.
I think so that's we're going to be
going with that one.
Yeah. Like you know what? That's a good point. The fig tree scene, I feel like that definitely that while watching the movie again, I was like, "Oh, that's actually kind of a brilliant scene to have," because there's the whole like, "Oh yeah, each tree could takes in enough water for 5 people, There's 20 trees, 100 people. And he's like, well, why don't we take them down and save water? He's like, well, no, we can't. This is tradition. Like it just like, it's such
not even just like this is a tradition, but that this is an old dream. These things are holy and symbols of a dream of a better life, of a better world. And that kind of leads into like the whole like religious themes of Dune very well, with how just because something is done for religion's sake doesn't mean that it's pure and holy, but in fact can be very dark and evil.
Yeah. Well, isn't that the point of like the Jamis fight scene towards the end too? Like, it's all tradition, and even though like, because like that's what happens with Paul, and Paul even says like, do you yield? And Stilgar is just like, that's not, we don't do that here. I feel like that also kind of reinforces that, because Jamis is like, no, is it Jamis? Am I saying it right?
I think it's Jamis.
Jamis, yeah. But like that, but you know what I mean? Like this character that he serves as a purpose for Paul as a character, where it's Paul's first time killing a man, but then it's also still reinforcing the idea that like, oh, these people love their traditions. These like, everybody in the story of Dune loves their traditions, and they hold them like very close to their hearts.
Yeah. Also, something interesting on the topic of Jamis while we're here. I think it's really neat that in part 1, a lot of the visions that that Paul has, like, it shows Jamis, not like Stilgar anyway, Jamis, and like almost like in an alternate universe where they might have been friends. But it could also, like, when he says, "Let me show you the ways of the desert" in his dream, that could just be about killing Jamis too. Like, yes. Which is so interesting and cool, and I like what they did with that. People complain about the flashbacks or like scenes in like Dune Part 1. I remember people being like, wow, Dune Part 1 is partially a movie and partially trailers for Part 2. And I'm like, no, that's just how the book is. You're stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was one of the big things I remember when it first came out. People were just like, "Oh, I can't believe Zendaya was in his dreams." It's like, well, yeah, because Shani doesn't show up until the second half. Like, she's not important until later on. Like,
I mean, yeah, sure, I memed about it, like being like, yeah, wow, she was really top billed just to be in flashbacks. But like at the same time, like, I knew she was going to show up later. I knew she was going to be important later. It just felt funny that she was so top billed and was there for like 15 minutes.
I mean, I get it because it's Zendaya and you want to advertise, hey, we have Zendaya in this movie. Like, a lot more people are going to go watch the movie then.
I mean, yeah, I like understand it from a marketing perspective. I just still think it's funny.
I think it's funny that even though Shani is a character that's more prominent in the second half, she was still featured in the first movie, whereas like other characters who are prominent in the second half weren't cast yet until Part 2. So but again,
well, that's because she was showing up in his dreams, like even in the book, like so that's why she was already cast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's just funny to think about, because then there's other characters that didn't show up, but they show up later on, like Fade and Irulan and the Emperor himself. So but again, they show up in the second movie. We'll talk about.
We'll get to.
Oh god, are there any other characters? Well, Dr. Kynes, I feel like we should mention, because
yeah, Dr. Kynes is gender swapped in this, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, which is interesting, even because like it, the character doesn't really change. Like she still serves the same purpose, so it ultimately doesn't matter. Although I gotta mention this, I don't know if I'm stupid. Maybe I think I am stupid, but it only took me until rewatching the miniseries to realize that Dr. Kynes is Shawnee's parent. I never known that. I did not realize it. How many times have I seen all these movies, various versions of Dune, and it took me until now to realize that.
Yeah, actually, the thing is, if I remember correctly, Kynes was actually the leader of Stilgar's siege before he died. Stilgar's his brother.
Stilgar. So here's the thing. I always thought Stilgar was the father of Shawnee. I don't know why I thought that looking back. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Where's the evidence that proves that? Because, like, that's never mentioned either. I don't know. I guess, so obviously, again, the Lynch film gave me no favors because, they don't even talk about that. But in the miniseries...
Lynch film is just... Yeah. It's like the Family Guy funny moments of the Dune series.
Yeah, I was going to get no help from that movie. But, like... I think in the miniseries, they do explicitly say that Dr. Kynes is Shawnee's father. Even though they don't share any scenes, but it's still said because she does have a scene where she like goes off and like, cries about the fact that her father's dead. And then here in this movie or the next movie, I don't think it's ever said. I don't think so, but it is heavily implied. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, it is. Or at least I'm pretty sure it is. Like, honestly, the way that I watched Dune 2 was a bit muffled with no subtitles. So, but I'm pretty sure it went into that a little. Like,
I mean,
they had to.
I don't know. I don't think it's ever said. But in part 1, there is a scene where Paul confronts Dr. Kynes. Is just like, I know you love these people and you have a reason that you've stayed around. And I'm like, oh. Because she has a daughter in Fremen. It's like, and I feel like that does make Dr. Kynes' relationship with the Fremen a lot more interesting now that I know that, yes, she has a daughter in the Fremen. Like, that makes her connection to the Fremen all the more stronger. And I kind of like that. And I'm glad I realized that. And even though it's not explicitly said, I still understand that connection in this version, because of the way that the dialogue still kind of delivers it, but not really, because it's not really the point of the movie. The movie doesn't really change one way or the other, whether or not it's explicitly said that Shawnee is Kynes' daughter. It's still just there for anybody who realizes that,
Yeah.
Do we want to like move on to talking about the music?
Sure, we can talk about the music.
All right, let's talk about the music. Hans Zimmer, for once in his life, not making music for a Nolan film, he moved on to making music for a Villeneuve film. And honestly, even so, the music is kind of a weird thing for me because I love the Toto score in the Lynch film. I freaking love it. It's fantastic. I like the music in the miniseries. But I feel like this score for the Villeneuve films is also very, very good. Because,
I do agree.
Man, like it gets really, really freaking like angelic and atmospheric, especially in the next movie. But like here is when it like really shines. I feel like it's so good.
Like, honestly, like, when a Hans Zimmer score is impressive when I like it, because I have beef against Hans Zimmer. Because his shit always sounds the same until you hit the main motif. Like, if you compare, like, the Batman to the Superman theme, sounds the fucking same. Like, I have a beef with the guy. I mean, I know, like, some of it is just because he does so much shit.
Oh, yeah.
There's definitely scores where he actually cares about the movie, and then there's scores where he's just taking in the paycheck.
Remember, he's done music for the Boss Baby movies.
Yeah, like, no, exactly. So, like, Like I can respect the grind, but that's just why I have a beef with Hans Zimmer and think he's overrated. But this score is actually very good.
Yeah.
I really like this Sardaukar chant, goes crazy. Paul's dream is also very good. The whole like lamentation. I keep forgetting what the one with the lamentation thing. I think that is partially part of Paul's dream.
Right.
But like they go like the tracks go crazy. The whole like Atreides thing with the bagpipes, that track goes hard.
Dude, when they first walk out onto Arrakis and like you have like the bagpipe playing and they're just walking out of the desert. Oh, it was so good.
Yeah.
I was like, bagpipe music, hell yeah.
Like it was clear like he actually gave a shit about this movie.
No, you know what? I agree. I'm not a huge Hans Zimmer fan. I mean, the scores that everybody loves from him, you know,
they're bangers. Like they're objectively bangers.
Yeah, your Dark Knights, your Lion Kings. Yeah, obviously those are amazing. This is definitely one where I'm like, you know, this is up there as like one of his best. I think, you know, this is up there with his Boss Baby tracks. Let's be real.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like, again, it's like we were saying with the costuming and the cinematography and the production design, like it definitely meshes well with what the tone is going for, I feel like. And I feel like that's important. Like, even though there are some changes in this from like the book or the miniseries or from like what came before it, it's still unequivocally its own version while still having that connection to the original source material.
Yeah. No, exactly. Actually, there's a scene I wanted to talk about. I don't know if we are getting to specific scenes, but I just wanted to talk about
if you have something to talk about, please.
Yeah. This one was one that wasn't in any other of the adaptations of Dune, which is when Mapes gives Jessica the Chris knife. I actually really like that scene. Because like if you read the book, like you can absolutely tell like they paid attention to what was going on in Jessica's mind from the book.
Right.
Because when Shut Up Mapes asks what it is and Jessica says it's a maker, and then, you know, Mapes does her whole crazy thing. Like, you notice how Jessica was interrupted when she said maker. Like, sounded like she was gonna say more. That's because originally in the book she was gonna say a maker of death until Mapes had her reaction, and then like she was like, okay, I'm gonna shut up because clearly like if I say anything more, I'm gonna look sus. This was clearly the right answer. Like, she just stumbled into it, which is so good in terms of like like cementing the fact that this prophecy is bullshit. Like. Something made by man. Yeah. And I really liked how they handled that scene in Dune Part 1. Like,
no, that sounds really interesting because it is like a really good scene, regardless, because, you know, that's how you introduce this character. And I feel like this version of what is it, Shadow Mapes? Yeah, like she is far more engaging and just having basically one scene. Maybe I think she comes back. Is she also at the scene when Paul sees the Hunter Seeker? Was that her? Because I know that's her in the Lynch film, but like, is that her in this version?
No, I don't think that was her in this version, although she comes in after, I think. Right. But she is also there. I think she was the one that when Leto was like checking out who like was fucking on the floor, it was her.
I think she's always that character that Leto finds in all three versions of Dune I've seen. It's always Mapes that Leto finds. Yes. Yeah, no, but I mean, the Hunter Seeker scene, I guess, to get into that one, I mean, controversial take, better than the Lynch film. So, you know,
you know what, like, I feel like that scene is the best in this film because it doesn't, I love the miniseries, don't get me wrong, but at least the Hunter Seeker isn't a flying sperm.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's comedy to be had with that, but in a movie I'm supposed to take seriously, yes, I think they do this scene justice, for sure. I really love. I think I gotta talk about the Gom Jabbar scene, like, well, the pain
Oh
box
yeah.
scene, just because, I feel like watching that scene in a theater was when I was like that, because like while watching the movie, I was like, obviously this is gonna be better than the Lynch Dune, but like, is this actually gonna hold up on its own? And watching that scene, I was like, okay, I'm in for something real special here. Like for the first time watching it in a theater, that pain box scene, like, wow. Uh,
Yeah.
and I wanted to bring up the pain box scene because I guess just to talk a little bit about the Blu-ray, we don't have to, end off our discussion just yet. I just want to mention the Blu-ray I have for Dune Part One. So I got to tell this story. Obviously, after I watched Dune Part One in theaters, I'm like, I got to get it on like 4K or like a nice steelbook. And had this steelbook like in my Best Buy cart for like a couple weeks before it like went on, before it like was available to buy. And I think the day before I was about to buy it, I think William was just like, "Hey, did you hear about this Target exclusive where it's the pain box, like casing,
Oh my
surrounding the
god.
Blu-ray?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna fall for that one." So I bought that instead. So thank you, William.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, William. Very cool.
So I have. It's a standard Blu-ray of Dune Part One, and it comes with this like little box with like the Atreides like logos on it, but then you put that box in the pain box, and yeah, it's like this cardboard version of the pain box, and I just have it, and I think it's the funniest thing that I just have like this pain box that it was like a Target exclusive, I believe.
That's great.
So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that we don't have to get right into the Blu-ray just yet. If there's like other things you want to talk about with the actual movie.
I'm trying to like think because like everything else is pretty much like standard in regards to like Dune adaptations. Like I do feel like out of like I feel like how do I put it? Despite being 2 hours and 30 minutes, it still feels rushed. That is like one of my. I mean, admittedly, with every single adaptation of the Fall of Atreides, I feel like it isn't as tense and atmospheric as the book ever really was. There's like a lot of the thing that I don't think any of them get into is that people were suspicious of Jessica being the traitor.
Well,
like, I mean, like I think they did that a bit in like the Lynch Dune, but yeah, a lot of people thought it was Jessica that was gonna be the one that betrayed them. Actually, when Gurney finds Jessica in the book, he tries to kill her for revenge.
That's in the miniseries.
Thufir Halwa. Yeah, wait, really? That was in the miniseries.
That was in the miniseries.
Right?
I noticed that. Yeah, so I must have missed that the first time. But yeah, upon rewatch, I was watching the miniseries, and yeah, when Paul meets Gurney again, he brings him back, and Gurney immediately goes up to Jessica and was just like, "I'm gonna kill the traitor," and we're just like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! She's not the traitor, I swear."
This is so funny that because I've watched the miniseries a million times, but the thing about like watching so many Dune adaptations over and over again, because of my fucking autism, is that the adaptations kind of blur. Like I'm just like, and the book is like the one grounding factor of all of these adaptations. Right?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. You have the book as like a grounded version of the story, whereas like me, I'm flip-flopping between these three versions that I've seen. I'm trying to make the miniseries like the more grounded version because the
miniseries is the most book accurate out of all of them. I feel like it waters down the themes, but in terms of like the actual events that happen, it is the most one-to-one adaptation.
Yeah, and I feel like I can feel confident in saying that I feel like grounding it there because I feel like it would have been Dune Part 1 or like these Villeneuve films, but as we said, and as we'll get in with Part 2, that does make some changes that I'm not really, I don't know, I'm still kind of weirded out by. But I feel like with Dune Part 1, regardless of the fact that it does kind of rush through some things, and that, this was a criticism when it first came out. People were just like, well, it's Part 1. We don't really know if Part 2 is going to make it all worth it. I feel like still after watching through Part 2, I'm still, I still feel confident in saying that Part 1 is definitely up there for me, like as one of my favorite pieces of Dune media that I've seen, just because.
No, I agree. I still really like it. Like, I mean, sure, like, my ranking has gone up and down over time. Like right now, it like I remember the last time I reviewed it, I put it as like a 5 on Letterboxd, and then I started when I first watched it, it was a 4, or not when I first watched it, but when I first rewatched it, it was no, it was I was when I first watched it. Because I forget when I actually started using Letterboxd, but no, that's around when it came out. So when I first watched it, it was like 4 stars. When I watched it, it went to 4.5 stars. When I watched it a third time, it went to 5 stars. And then this recent time, it went back down to 4 stars because I was soured by part 2 a little when I rewatched it. So, I mean, I'll get into what I rated part two later, but like on Letterboxd. But like,
I feel like a lot of our thoughts on part 2 we definitely need to get into part 2 sooner rather than later. But I feel like, I guess, to kind of wrap this up with part 1, I am very confident in my 9 out of 10 rating. I think it was very smart of them to split it into 2 movies because
it was impossible to just do into one movie.
Like, I know, because they tried that before, and look how that happened. Look what happened. So I feel like even though the pacing is a little wonky, I feel like because I'm not as familiar with the book, I'm still able to get something out of it because it's not the Lynch film, and that it's not trying to be the mini series. Like, it's still trying to be its own thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I'm like, I mainly don't worry about like the number specifically. I think like stars are just fine, and like for a 4-star, like I still think like a 4.5 star like ranking is like completely perfect for like Dune Part 1 in my opinion. Like it is visually incredible, like the acting and performances is great, the music is great. As an overall cinematic package, like adaptation thrown to the side, like it's a very good movie. Like
I agree.
You cannot deny that fact. Like it is a very good movie. And even as an adaptation of the first part of the book, for what it is, it did an amazing job. Like, Dune has been long considered to be unadaptable, and it did a pretty good job at adapting it into a movie format instead of, like, something like a miniseries, which I still wish he had gone with, but, you know.
No, but yeah, that's the thing is, like, I've noticed is that through these various versions I've seen, like, it's definitely helped to kind of strengthen how I feel about each version through the fact that I've seen like multiple different interpretations. And so, you know, barring all of that in mind, like, you know, throwing the miniseries, the book, the Lynch film out of the way, judging it as its own thing, I still really like it. Like, I was never bothered by the fact that it was a part 1 because I still feel like it ended. Yeah, it ended obviously open-ended with more is to come, but like I still feel like I can get an actual 3-act structure, satisfying story out of it. And even with part 2, I still feel confident in my 9 out of 10 rating, and I still love this movie. Again, it's one of my favorite films of the 2020s so far. Like, it's just that good. I love it so much.
Yeah, that's completely fair.
So, was there anything else we have to say about it?
Nope. I think that's pretty much what I had to say about part 1.
Well, I will say, this Blu-ray I have it on, it's just a standard Blu-ray. I feel like I want something a little nicer, like a 4K or a Steelbook. I will say I will never get rid of the pain box that it came in. Like, if I give away this Blu-ray, I'm keeping the pain box, like, no matter what, because I just think that's funny, like, that I have the pain box.
Valid as hell. I love that for you.
So, yeah. But yeah, let's get into part 2 then, because I feel like there is a lot to say about part 2. Let me just say that despite my issues, I feel like I feel like the same issues you have, I probably have. I will say the first 2/3 of this movie, I freaking adored. Like, I was watching through it, the first 2/3. I was just like, yeah, this is really good. I can understand like that little Alia change. It probably bugged Puff a little, but I feel like it still works. And then it gets into the third act, and I'm like, I'm starting to not like this as much anymore. You know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like, no, like I feel like for me, at first when it came to like the changes in the first 2/3, I was kind of like, oh, they're just gonna spell this out now. Oh, okay. I don't know how I feel about that. I didn't really care what they did with Alia, and especially since it kind of felt like I don't know why it felt like Alia was like, how to describe it, like Alia was cunning in her own right, like she was like smart beyond her years, but at the same time she was still kind of like a child. And so having her like specifically like be like talking to Paul through her mom and doing scheming with them when she never really did that in the book kind of rubbed me the wrong way personally. I don't like really the direction they went with her, but I did like the direction they went with Chani and actually fleshing her out as something more than Paul's love interest, where she actually doesn't believe the prophecy, she just loves him. And I really liked that. I liked the whole like divide between the older believers and then the younger non-believers. I liked that Paul and Chani had time to develop and grow a relationship rather than it being like, oh yeah, they just got together like they did in the book. Because Frank Herbert was less of a character writer per se, and I feel like this one went more focused on the characters themselves. So that was those are some things I did kind of like. I was mixed on how blatant they were making the whole like he's not the Messiah thing at first, because I was like, one of the things I like about the first Dune, as long as you get to Messiah, is how easy it is to get swept up in the same religious frenzy as the Fremen while reading it. Like, even though the subtext is still there, like blatantly there, almost like not like blatantly, but like it's like nuanced. But if you read it, you'll notice that it's there. While this one like spells it out for you, and I didn't know how I felt about that until I saw people on Twitter still not getting it. And then I was like, you know what? This is a blockbuster movie for modern general audiences. I get it. I get it now. I get it why you did this, because people are fucking stupid.
Well, so I think that's where my issues definitely arise. So I did have issues throughout the first 2/3, but there were so many great sequences that I was just like, maybe this will all work out in the end. And not to say that like it totally fumbles the bag in the third act. I'm just saying the really cool sequences already happened, and the third act, despite having a lot of really cool sequences, didn't really balance out the changes that I really hooked with.
Continue.
But I was just going to say that, it is definitely a lot more obvious in this version that, like, oh, Paul's not the Messiah. And it's like, so you're basically saying that, like, I get it, movie. You're saying, you have the exact same themes as the book, but I feel like, by making it more obvious, I can't really connect or really dive into this. I can't really analyze it. It's just like, okay, this is what the movie's going for now. It's like, okay,
that's how I feel towards it, where it's like I get why they went this way for a general audience's type understanding,
but now there's nothing to chew on.
Exactly. Like, especially when you're already planning to adapt Messiah, it's kind of weird that you're going into that right away. Like, it's so clear now, looking from part 1 to this one, and then hearing that he wanted to adapt Messiah, that he was clearly aiming for Messiah to be, like, the 3, like, in a way.
Yeah.
And that's completely... I understand that, like, that's completely valid, but at the same time, I feel like some nuance could have been kept, at least. Like, you could have still kept, like, the whole Chani thing and stuff like that, but, like, I do wish that they kept it a bit more nuanced until Messiah.
Yeah.
Like, if you were gonna adapt it until then, like, because then that really, like, hits home, like, the themes of Messiah.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
So for me, I feel like after watching part two, I'm definitely more like, I'm definitely more, I definitely stand more so by saying like the miniseries is my favorite adaptation. Or like, I feel like I can say that, like, you know, that does it better because I feel like while watching the miniseries again, there's that scene at the end where Paul is just going like all out, being like, I have like all these spice pockets, like, you know, ready to blow up. I'm going to make like, I'm going to stop space travel as far as I'm going to bring civilization down to its knees, basically. And it's just like, holy shit, dude. But like, you still understand why people would still follow him, because he's a very charismatic person. Like, and you still don't like the Emperor because he's so very obviously the villain. Whereas like here, I feel like, yeah, the movie, it makes it kind of hard to relate to these characters. I especially was just like, wow, they really changed Stilgar a lot, I felt, because he didn't feel like the same character from the previous one, you know? I feel like they really amped up his religious fanatic side a little more. Whereas I feel like I like Stilgar in the miniseries where, like, yeah, he became a bit of a fanatic towards the end because he's following Paul, but it's not as obvious, you know? Like, he was still started off as like this strong leader of the Fremen, and then
Yeah,
eventually like then like he slowly over time started to fall for Paul, you know?
yeah,
Whereas like,
it's yeah, continue.
well, and then in this one, Stilgar is just immediately like, "Oh, you're the Messiah." It's like, what? You didn't say that in the last movie. Where did this come from? Like, huh?
Like, I mean, like, yeah, Stilgar, like, kind of had his suspicions about Paul being the Mahdi, but, like, I feel like it's almost borderline comic relief the way
Yeah.
they paint Stilgar here. I've been seeing memes about Stilgar on Twitter, and it's like about like Paul takes a shit. Oh, he is the Mahdi. Like, I'm like, okay, come on, guys.
It's like the people in Life of Brian. You know, it's like a joke in Life of Brian. Like that's the level of this. It's like, okay, I was supposed to take this story seriously. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
and the whole...
like I get that, like, sometimes like religious people do seem that stupid and goofy, and and especially like seeing that stupid goofiness transform into something that is absolutely horrifying could hypothetically have been done better, in my opinion, and it could have been done well. I see the vision. I just don't think it was. There was like, I feel like part two really solidified my opinion that Villeneuve should have just made the miniseries. Like, because originally that was what Warner Brothers wanted him to do.
Right.
And I think this is one of the 3 times where I think they were actually like, right, this should have been a miniseries. As beautiful as a spectacle as it is for theaters, as much as I love these movies, I really do believe in my heart of hearts that either they should have done a Lord of the Rings style production where they had all these extra scenes there to make an extended cut after the fact, or they should have made the fucking miniseries. And with Villeneuve being like, oh, I deleted all the deleted scenes, by the way, fuck you. Fuck you. Like, seriously. Like,
yeah, that's insane.
I'm sorry, like, but that is, like, the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
Like, I can get it if you're like, this is my baby. Once I'm done editing it, I'm done editing it. I don't want any more director's cut. But getting rid of the deleted scenes,
that's too
really
far. Yeah, that's too far.
Come on.
That's like that's like parody levels of like insane director auteur theory. Like, that's so stupid. I don't subscribe to that. And another thing that really bothers me about this movie is, well, I do like that Shawnee gets more of a character. I like that she's like this character that is kind of opposing Paul's messianic figure. With that said, I don't buy that Shawnee likes Paul by the end throughout the movie, especially the second half. I'm just like, okay, I don't buy them as a relationship anymore, because like, at what point does she like Paul? And at what point is Paul not trying to act like a messiah? You know, like it's just kind of weird. It's just like, okay, you don't subscribe to his messianic figure head anymore. so what do you like in him anymore? You know, like by the second half, I'm just like, why are you still with him? You know, and she does leave eventually, like at the very end, like very, very end, but like, I don't know. Like, I get like she's still there to like, you know, fight for the Fremen cause, because that is very consistent with her character throughout. Like she's more about her people than she is about Paul, but she still falls for Paul, but then doesn't. I don't know. I feel like maybe I need to rewatch the film to like get a better understanding of what they were going with her. I just don't feel like it meshes well in the second half, you know?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I feel like their love, like they have some level of chemistry, but it doesn't seem deep enough to be like, you know, even though he's totally fucked up right now, I still want to be with him and see if I can fix things.
Exactly.
Type vibe. Yeah. So yeah, I get where you're coming from with that. Although I do kind of like the horror of Chani's situation, like, a lot, like, especially since she doesn't really fully believe that he's, like, the Messiah. I do, like, I feel like that's the thing, is, like, a lot of these changes are interesting, but I'm not sold on them as much as I should be, like... And, like, where I'm like, yeah, this is an interesting idea. I like what you're trying to go through with this, but I don't feel like there was enough time to develop this.
I will say...
into its full conclusion.
Yeah, I will say, I feel like you could go either way further with Chani to make me, you know, see her changing character to be, like, to make me, like, really fully love this change decision. Maybe you like go full Carmela Soprano on her, where like she eventually just gives up and is just like, all right, you are the Messiah, like I'm all for this now. Or you double down the other way and it's like, okay, I don't want to be with you, in which case I guess they're going to explore that more in Dune 3, which kind of bugs me now, because I feel like Dune 2, the reason we were hyping up Dune 2 is like, okay, now we're going to get a complete story now. But we don't, because now there's going to be a Dune 3. So we're still left with like an unfinished story here by the end. I'm like, huh.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about them, like, just straight up sequel baiting Messiah.
Yeah.
Especially, like, I feel like I would care less about them sequel baiting Messiah if it wasn't a 2027 release. If the next film if it was the next film that Villeneuve was going to be releasing, I honestly wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're sequel baiting it when it's going to be coming out, like, 2027, maybe later, maybe not at all, considering the way Warner Brothers is right now. Like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I really don't.
Again, to bring up the miniseries again, yes, that eventually leads into another miniseries, the Children of Dune miniseries. The first miniseries still ends like it ends in a way where you can keep going with these characters, but it still ends in a satisfying way. Like at the end, I'm like, oh, I just watched a satisfying conclusion to these characters. I can choose to continue if I want to, but maybe I choose not to. I think it's the same thing here. It's not the same thing here, actually. No, it's like it ends here. It's like, well, now I have to wait for this to actually conclude, you know? Like, I don't feel satisfied with the ending of Dune Part 2, which is really frustrating. So,
yeah, like, I get that.
But I feel like I have been bad-mouthing this movie for a while now.
like please don't misunderstand. Even though like I rated it a 3.5 stars on Letterboxd, I do like this movie a lot. It's just I'm disappointed by it because of what I was expecting based off of the first movie.
Yeah.
So I feel like also I will be honest, since I ended up having to watch it spicily, I wasn't getting the full experience that everyone else is getting.
Sure.
So I do also think my opinion is also partially influenced by that.
Right.
I'm going to try and see it like in theaters at some point. Like like I didn't do it already, obviously, but like in a better environment.
But
I feel like once I do, my opinion actually might change, and I'll be like, yeah, no, this is fire. This is fire.
Yeah.
But in
Well,
the
so
state that I watched it, it did kind of make things harder to see and hear.
no, but I feel like you still got the story down, and I feel like
Yeah,
that's
no, I
important.
still got the story. Yeah, the story down is really important, but I think
Yeah.
a lot of people got really swept up in the spectacle.
Oh,
And that's
dude,
what
yeah.
I'm thinking that, like, in watching it actually in, like, in a good theater environment would actually change my opinion and make me rate it, like, the same as the last one. Like,
But I think it's good that we're being so critical because,
I feel like people haven't been. I feel like there's been
No.
so many people who have been like, I read the book and I loved the changes actually, and I'm like, I mean, if you like them, good for you. Like,
Good
I'm
for you.
glad. I
But,
personally
yeah.
wasn't fully won over. I'm still gonna give it chances. Like, I'm not gonna be like,
Oh, yeah.
the Villeneuve Dunes don't even bother, man. No, I think like it has some interesting ideas that it brings up, and depending on how it concludes them in Messiah, could be incredibly well done. But I again, I'm pissed off with Alia because, dude,
Yeah.
not
Alia-
having
yeah.
Alia kill fucking Baron Harkonnen, like, I guess maybe he's not planning to adapt Children of Dune, which, okay, fair. But, like that kind of ruins the tragedy of Alia and irony of Alia getting possessed by the Baron.
Yeah. I think it also kind of ruins kind of a little thing to me from a storytelling perspective. It kind of makes the Gom Jabbar worthless at the end because it's like,
Oh yeah, because that's how
They
that's
never-
how he dies. It's like
they never used it. Like in the miniseries, they introduced the Gom Jabbar, and then at the end, Alia brings up the Gom Jabbar and uses it on the Baron. Like it's like that scene in Back to the Future Part 3 where Marty McFly uses the stovetop as like a bulletproof shield. It's like, that's clever for people paying attention, but like I don't think that was the intention of the Gom Jabbar, but I feel like you can still interpret it that way. Whereas in the Villeneuve films, it's like, oh, the only thing they bring the Gom Jabbar back is for when that lady uses it
Yeah.
on Fade. It's like, oh, she's gonna use it, and oh, look, it's the pain box. Oh, remember from the first movie? It's like, yeah, cool, but it's never used now. Like, what was the point?
Like, I didn't even think of that, but that's actually a very interesting point that you made. Like,
Yeah,
I also really don't like how Gurney is the one to kill Raban. Like,
Yeah.
in the books, in the miniseries, Raban is actually killed by the people that he was oppressing for so harshly for so many years. I
Yeah.
really like how they do it in, like, the miniseries, where it's like this kid's father, or this kid watches his father get his head cut off in front of him, and then he's the one to cut off Raban's head and hold it over the crowd.
I didn't even
Like
pick up
that
on
cheering
that.
crowd.
yeah.
It's such a good scene. Why did
That's
you not
good.
like take that one over? Like,
Yeah, well, that's
why are you
that's
focusing on the
frustrating-
crackers?
That's the frustrating thing is like, yeah, in the Lynch film, Raban gets his head removed. It's obviously off screen because you walk in and like, oh, there's Raban's head on the floor. It's like, oh, okay, cool. But then like here, there's a reason they chop off his head and they like hold it as like a trophy. Like, we've overtaken, like we've won. It's like, so in this one, they gotta have them chop off the head of Raban. No, like at the very least, I'm fine with Gurney killing Raban, but at least have him chop off the head and then hold it up. It's like, be consistent. It's like, no, he just gets stabbed in the neck and he falls over. It's like, okay, cool, whatever.
It felt a bit rushed, honestly.
It did.
Like,
It's like,
the final battle had some cool visuals, especially with like the fucking 3 worms and like the
Oh, God,
atomic
yeah.
blast and shit.
Oh,
Honestly,
that was
I'm sure
cool.
like Nolan watched Dune 2 with a sigh of relief that it got delayed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the third act just fell apart. Also, I really dislike how in like the last part they took out the line where Paul tells the Reverend Mother, look into the place where you dare not look. You'll find me staring right back at you.
Yeah.
Like, come on, that's such a good line.
They kept the silence line, which I appreciate, but
Yeah, they got the silence line, but yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I also, so again, much like the Dr. Kynes thing, I have to bring this up. am I stupid for not realizing? Are they actually Harkonnen, the Atreides?
Yes.
Okay.
Jessica is the Baron Harkonnen's daughter.
Baron Harkonnen's daughter.
This is very spelled out.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's okay because again, these are very dense books. So if you forget shit, like I forget shit all the time. So like, I get it. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, basically Jessica is the Baron Harkonnen's daughter. Basically, you know what they did to Fade? Where they had the Bene Gesserit woman seduce him and then test him, and then like she was like, "Yeah, his bloodline is secured. It's a girl."
Yeah.
They did that to the Baron. They did that to the Baron to wed him off, and then wed her off to wed her off in quotations to Leto, basically do a little eugenics, because I think I've talked about this with the Bene Gesserit. But they do this kind of stuff all the time where they will send out their agents to like seduce other royal houses, and then they send off the women that they are, or usually it's like they give birth to girls to have as concubines to continue their little eugenics thing, and they subtly will like influence the family lines that way, like either like to make them stronger or to make them weak. They are not opposed to even marrying, or like how do I put it? They're not even opposed to like doing incest. Like they'll keep it on secret on the down low. But
that has been apparent in all the Dune stuff that I've seen. Is that like the Bene Gesserit have like been planning this stuff for like generations upon generations, and then that's the point of like Paul being born wasn't supposed to happen. They're just like, you're supposed to birth a daughter, and she's like, no, I birthed the son because I love Leto so much. So that has always been apparent. I guess I just never realized that. Like, well, again, my introduction to Dune was the Lynch film. That gave me no favors. So.
Yeah, the Lynch film doesn't do anyone any favors.
But yeah, I feel like we have been negative, rightfully so, because I feel like we do need to be not negative, but critical.
Like critical. Like there are things, because again, like as I said, like I like some of the ideas that it brings to it. I'm not fully sold on it like everything else. But like the core movie in and of itself, if I threw the book out the window, I do not blame anybody for thinking this is a 5-star movie.
Oh yeah, no.
Like if I had never read the book, I would be foaming at the mouth. I'd be like, yo, this is great, this is fire, this is amazing.
My issues are definitely personal. So let me talk about something I really love, and that is the first part where it is just Paul interacting with the Fremen. Like that I had like obviously I saw it in the miniseries, but like I feel like watching it in movie form, seeing these characters interact is very important, because like we had said with the Lynch film, like that stuff is kind of glossed over. It's like this feels like you need to really dive into this part of the story. And I feel like this movie does a very good job at having Paul interact with Chani and Stilgar and all these other Fremen characters, blow up spice machines that the Harkonnen are using. And I also love the actual, like, Paul's sandworm ride. Like, holy shit. I loved seeing that. So I gotta say, because I saw this in theaters, I was like dead center, like in the theater, like looking straight, like I was in the most middle seat I could be, looking dead center at the screen. And let me tell you, experiencing that one shot of like the worm going over the hill, because you're from that perspective of Paul, like being like on the middle of the worm, like holy shit, dude. Like that's awesome.
Gotta be fire. Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. Like obviously I feel like, with the past two versions that we've seen, sandworm riding has been obviously very much just in front of a backdrop, and they're just like, oh, we're riding on a worm now. It's like, sure. Whereas like here, I felt like the intense winds and the sand flying everywhere and the spice going everywhere. Like it felt awesome. Just a little thing I noticed, this was like where they had like a bunch of people on the worms. It fully like connected with me this time. I'm just like, worms are like buses in this world, because that's how people travel far distances. Like
they summon the worms to the worm Uber.
Yeah, the worm Ubers. Like I don't know, that it finally hit me this time around. I'm like, oh, that's funny. they're just worm buses. But it's still really cool. I think it's still done in a way that I can take it seriously. It's just a thought in my head I thought was really funny. But I gotta say, the sequence that takes the cake for me is the black and white Giddy Prime scenes.
Yeah, like, oh my god, that just went so crazy, actually.
Yeah.
Like, it really did feel so otherworldly and
Yes.
surreal, and like
That to me is the best part of the movie.
That coldness in contrast to like the harsh warmth of the desert, like, oh, so good. Like,
yeah. And I feel like this is when we should probably talk about Fade, played by Austin Butler. I kind of love this version of Fade.
No, this is my favorite version of him,
Yeah.
like, by far. Like, he's so good.
Yeah. So the thing with Fade is that in the Lynch film, he's played by Sting. And I just liked his version in that movie because he's pretty much the only actor having fun in that movie. And translating it into a good performance. Like, Sting in that movie is just hilarious.
Yeah.
But he's very psychotic. I feel like he gets the psychotic nature of Fade down pretty well. The miniseries, I mean, I like that version of Fade. I forget the actor's name who plays him. But it always kind of bothered me that he just kind of looks like some random college frat guy in that miniseries. Like, he doesn't really translate well into being the psychopath. Like, I don't know. He just looks like some like college frat dude. He's just like, hey guys, it's me, Fade. I'm like, oh, okay. Don't get me wrong, the actor does a really good job in that miniseries. I'm just saying the look doesn't really translate well. Whereas here, Austin Butler's Fade, I was like, okay, this dude is psychotic. He looks monstrous. He is easily one of the best parts of the movie for me. Like, holy crap, dude. Like, I knew I was right in saying that I wish Austin Butler a happy and prosperous career after Elvis, because holy crap, he's doing just fine.
Like, yeah, no, Austin Butler, like, from what I've seen of him, is just an amazing character actor. Like,
Yeah.
he is very, very good at just portraying characters and melting into roles. So yeah, dude, like, give this guy a career. Let him just be a silly little character actor. Never typecast him. Just let him do his thing. I actually think he's a rising star. Absolutely. Yeah. If he does not get like propelled because of his performance in this, then like clearly Hollywood is even more brain dead than I thought.
Exactly. I'm waiting for the day that William lands on Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure on the wheel, because we still haven't finished the High School Musical cinematic universe.
Wait, is Austin Butler in that?
Yeah, that's
what?
Yeah, he's in Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure. I think that's like one of his first roles. I don't remember, but like he's in Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure, a movie I have not seen yet.
Fucking way.
So I'm waiting for William to land on it, but it hasn't happened yet. Someday, though. I'm very much looking forward to that. One of these days. One of these days. But yeah, no. But yeah, Austin Butler, and especially just his, it's just so good. Like, the way he's introduced, like, you just see his bald head, and then, like, I love the black and white because, you know, it's not just, they don't just, like, go right into black and white and just for that sequence. Like, it's very clever in how it's, like, only black and white underneath the sun. So like whenever characters are like walking down a hallway and then it transforms fully into black and white from color, like, oh, like that was really cool.
That is like, oh, it's just such a cool fucking sequence. Like, it's such a cool sequence.
Yeah, it is easily the best part of the movie for me.
That's actually one of the things that never really that scene was one that they never really got adapted from the books. Like in any other adaptation. They kind of do it in the miniseries where you see him fighting a bunch of slaves and like the Baron's kind of like watching him, but it's not to like the full extent that it was in this one. Although they do kind of leave out the fact that they do bring the fact that like one of the people he was fighting wasn't fully drugged and came to in the middle of the fight. In the movie, they have that be the Baron that did that to like give his nephew some glory for his birthday or whatever. But like that wasn't actually what happened in the book. In the book, it was Thufir that did it as a way to try and kill Faye.
Okay.
Um
Yeah, because isn't Stephen McKinley Henderson like credited with being in this movie? I don't remember seeing him in the movie.
he is credited, but I think it's specifically because they did shoot things with him.
Right.
But that got cut.
Right. Okay.
So I think they were going to keep the Thufir subplot in part 2, but decided to cut it due to time, which is completely valid and understandable.
Well, they had to keep it.
Trying to keep it 2 hours and 30 minutes, I respect that. Yeah. Like, you could have made it longer, and people wouldn't have complained that much.
They probably had to cut it because they brought back the cat and rat attached in the box subplot. the audiences weren't ready to bring that back. Yeah,
they weren't ready for the cat milking sequence.
You know what? Now that you mentioned that's apparently a change, I kind of like that change because that is one of the very few sequences we get in these Villeneuve films where it actually shows the Baron being schemy. Like, I could absolutely see the Baron in the miniseries pull a stunt like that on Fade. Like, that is something like
that's one it's one of those changes where it's like I don't really mind that change at all.
Right.
Like it's so minor in the course of things that it doesn't really matter.
And I do like how Fade, when he eventually kills that guy who wasn't drugged, he's just like, "Oh, you fought well, Atreides," and then he brings that line back when he fights Paul in the Paul and Fade showdown. He brings it back and he's just like, "Oh, you fought well, Atreides." Like, okay, that's a neat callback. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I was like eepy. But yeah, no, like that was like a thing like in the book as well, where it was like they kept a few just to like kill off slowly one by one.
Yeah, no, that's really, really cool. Like that just
it does show like how evil they are.
Yeah, they are bastards. I love that. Oh yeah, no, and I guess we could talk a little bit about Fade, like to bring up Fade and Paul's showdown. Like I really do like it. Like I think visually it looks great. Like the whole shot where like you could see the sun outside from the window. Like that's really cool. I'm just like, oh, like that's really good. That's a really cool sequence. And I do like that Paul does get stabbed, you know? It's not like the Lynch film where like he just beats him unconditionally and it's like, oh, there was no tension, because there's no tension in that movie. And I like how in the miniseries, like I think Paul does get stabbed too, or he gets his chest sliced, but it's like
he gets his chest sliced, but also there was like a point where in the miniseries where Fade does have him because there's a belt with poison on it and he could like quickly thrust his hips and like stab Paul.
Yeah.
But then he's like, "Do you yield?" And Paul uses that breach between their traditions to kill Fade.
Right.
And that was something that was interesting. But I do like how they handle it in this one as well. I also really like that they cut the music, making it really like tense.
Yeah. And it's a very well directed sequence with that. Yeah. Yes, I agree. I will say I don't know how I feel about well, I guess we could get into other characters that were introduced in this one. So like Princess Irulan, Florence Pugh. How do you feel about Princess Irulan? Because I think this is another case of I prefer the miniseries version.
I do prefer the miniseries version to an extent, but I think this Princess Irulan is more true to the Irulan of the books. So I'm okay with it. Like,
okay.
Because Irulan in the books she was a very scholarly woman, but also incredibly morally gray. While I feel like she was played a bit more like she was more of a good person in the miniseries, which she never really came off like that in the books. Right. But I do like Pugh's performance, but I feel like I can't really rate her as Irulan until we get knee deep until Messiah.
That's a good point. Yeah,
because that's where Irulan's really going to have more of a focus.
Yeah.
And that's when we can really like decide like how she handles being Irulan. Okay, so I do actually want to talk about this because I think this is so fucking funny. Okay. So Christopher Walken plays the Emperor, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But Christopher Walken is also in the music video for the song Weapon of Choice by Fatboy Slim. And in the song Weapon of Choice, Fatboy Slim, there is a Dune reference.
Oh.
And I am 99% certain that is why Christopher Walken was cast as the Emperor.
Is it the scene where he's like floating?
Yeah, well, not the scene where he's floating, but like there's a line in the song where it's like, if you walk without rhythm, you won't attract the worm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's that line.
You know what? I'm all for that then. Well, let's talk about Christopher Walken as the Emperor, because I was so excited to see Christopher Walken as Emperor of the Known Universe. That sounds amazing. Christopher Walken being the Emperor of the Known Universe. Like, we all know that's what he actually is in real life. But anyway, him playing it in a movie was cool. I don't know, though. You know, I'm kind of disappointed.
He wasn't there enough, like, honestly. Right. Like, and his performance was very subdued when he was there. So, like, I can't really, like, compared to, like, all the other incredible performances, like, Christopher Walken was just kind of there.
Yeah, I like the idea that he's there. Like, I would never want him to be replaced by anybody.
Like, of course, like I love the circular connection.
the circular connection, and just the fact that Christopher Walken's there, and on paper he is the Emperor of the universe. It's like, okay, you know what? Good enough. I'm just saying, I would have liked a little more Walkenisms of him actually being there. You know, like, I don't know, maybe put him in a goofy getup. Like, he just has like this black robe on the most of the time, and he just looks like Christopher Walken. It's just like, I don't know, like, you know, the emperors in the other versions had goofy getups, and I kind of bought them a little more as like emperors of the known universe. Like, especially what was his name? Giancarlo something or other, the guy in the miniseries. Like, he had like getups on throughout the series where I'm like, all right, he is Emperor of the Universe.
Yeah, like it is gaudy, it is ostentatious, and that is something that I did kind of notice with the costume designs for him and Irulan, because like the whole point about them was supposed to be that they were so comfortable and borderline hedonistic in ways, and you know, very self-indulgent and soft.
That's something that, you know, Jodorowsky got. Like, he didn't get a lot of what the book was saying,
but I don't think he wanted to.
But he did get that. Like, he had Salvador Dali in mind, and a robot version of Salvador Dali. Like, you know, like, I feel like, I want to see more of that. Like, a robot version of Christopher Walken. Why not? You know,
why not? You know, bring some of the Horodowski's vision in there. You know, all the versions of Dune.
Yeah, but you're right. Like, it definitely felt a little more subdued, and I get it. You know, it's a nearly 3-hour long movie. You don't have to like go all out. Again, just having Christopher Walken there as the Emperor of the known universe is kind of good enough. Yeah,
like you know, it's just like when you hear Christopher Walken as, you expect a little bit more, but
exactly,
it's a 2.5 hour long movie. If there's things that are rushed over, considering how dense the book is, fine. Like, I'll live. I'll manage. Like, if anything, like, this is gonna sound crazy, okay, but like, if anything, I still wouldn't mind if, like, in another 20 years or so, someone attempts to adapt Dune again. Like,
I mean,
not that, like, I know some people will complain, being like, no, this is the definitive adaptation. I disagree. I think Dune is one of those stories that is just infinitely adaptable because of how dense it is, how much gets left out, how much gets kept in from in each version, what gets changed, what gets kept, and it's such a timeless and unfortunately constantly relevant story that I don't really mind it getting brought back into public consciousness every once in a while with a new adaptation.
Yeah, it's like I've said, all 3 versions I've seen I hold in some sort of value. Like,
Exactly. Like,
obviously,
yeah.
Villeneuve and the miniseries I hold unironically as great stories, and then the Lynch film I hold as like an ironic masterpiece that I love revisiting because it's so stupid. But like, yeah, I agree. Like, 20 years from now, why not do another Dune? Like, might as well. We've already had 3 different versions.
Yeah, like 3 different versions over the course of like, because like the first one was 84, the second one was 2000, the third one was 2021. So
Yeah.
like, I think every 20 years a new Dune adaptation with somebody who's incredibly passionate about the work and wants to take another crack at it. Like,
Yeah.
go for it, man. I feel like
Dune
it's going to be a
2049.
harder. Yeah, I mean, will it be a harder sell nowadays? Like, probably.
Probably.
But like, if you tried to like repackage it as a miniseries, being like, okay, yeah, I want to adapt it, but as a miniseries, go more in depth. Like, go for it, man. Like,
you could probably get something, I'm sure.
you could,
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody could get something as long as it's not like a cash grab and you're doing it because you genuinely love the books and you want to try to at least adapt up to like Children of Dune. Because I have a feeling. Just a gnawing feeling that Villeneuve has no interest in adapting Children of Dune at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or the rest of the Dune books, for that matter.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of why Alia kind of got the boot in this.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting with Alia. So when I told you I got semi-spoiled by what I thought I had gotten semi-spoiled, and and then I actually watched the movie, and I'm like, okay, I did. So, well, I looked up like Denis Villeneuve Dune because I was like looking up images for something or other. I think I had like an idea for like the thumbnail for this episode, and I was just like, let me look up if I could find like the actual find an actual image I could use. And then like immediately like one of the top results for when I typed that in was just like Anya Taylor-Joy reveals like her secret Dune cameo, and I'm like, wait, what? Wait a minute. Puff did distinctly say that they didn't like how they changed Alia. Uh-oh. So then I went into the movie thinking that, oh, so here's what I thought was going to happen. I thought they were going to start the movie off like years later, like Alia's already been born, but they're going to make it Anya Taylor-Joy pretending to be a child. I was like,
no.
Oh, is that what they're doing? And then they didn't do that. But yeah,
honestly,
I still don't
that
like what
that
they
would have
did.
been stupid. That would have been even more stupid.
Yeah.
So yeah,
at first, the way they introduce Alia, how like she takes the water of Jessica takes the water of life, and then you see like you see the fetus inside. It starts getting surrounded by the water of life, and then you see the eyes open up. I was like, oh shit, here we go. We're gonna have some body horror. And then they don't do anything with her. She just stays in the stomach the rest of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay.
There's like Alia's such an interesting and tragic character, and it feels kind of disappointing that like Villeneuve seems to have no interest in her whatsoever.
Well, the weird thing is like it kind of makes the passage of time a little more confusing because it's like, okay, how long has it been if Alia's not born yet by the end of the movie, but Paul was able to like get the blue eyes before he took the water of life, mind you. And how long did Gurney's hair grow? Like, I thought like, that does not look like a couple of months worth of hair growth, like it's just like, what's the point? Like, how long has it been? Like, I feel like it's supposed to be like what, 2 years?
Yeah, it was like about 2 or 3 years. Because for those who haven't read the books, Paul eventually actually has a son with Chani who gets killed.
Yeah.
During one of the Harkonnen raids on the Sieches, and that's why they start moving further south. Because they're pushing harder. And one of the things that frustrates me about like that lack of like the time period is I feel like it's his son's death that causes Paul to fully snap and embrace the messianic, like, like make him snap and want to take the water of life.
Yeah,
because
that's what happens in the miniseries.
Yeah, because through the entirety of like the book and you kind of see it here in the Villeneuve Dune, he's kind of trying to fight against that whole thing because he knows like what's gonna happen if he does the holy war, the jihad. He doesn't want that to happen, but when his son dies, he just doesn't give a shit. He just wants revenge.
Yeah, exactly. Like that.
So he will get his like revenge at all costs. And so, like, I feel like removing that does kind of take away, because in the Villeneuve one, it just feels like he just randomly decides to take it one day.
Yeah, he's just like, yeah, okay, whatever.
He's like, I'm in the South, so fuck it, I guess I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not as strong as the miniseries, for sure. And then, yeah, again, the whole, like, okay, how long has it been that Alia is still in her stomach? This is like Bonnie and Family Guy. It's like she's pregnant for 7 years. Like, what are you doing? Like, this makes no sense. And then, yeah, then it is revealed in a dream sequence. Paul sees future Alia, that's Anya Taylor-Joy is future Alia. It's like, okay, what was the point then? Like, she doesn't add anything.
Yeah, like, really, it's... I get, like, needing to gloss over some things because of time, but this just feels...
Yeah, I guess they
like
wanted to have an Alia character because she's
there in the book and they wanted her to be there, and, like, I could...
But they didn't want to do another child actress, but it's just like, okay, yeah, it was awkward in the movie, but again, remember, the miniseries pulled it off just fine. Like... Yeah, it was goofy to see a child there, but I guess maybe. But
honestly, Alia was a little bit goofy, anyways. Like, because she is a child who talks like an adult.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the inherent anachronism is uncomfortable and a little silly.
Yeah.
But like, so yeah, it bothers me.
I think I wouldn't mind the whole like Alia is speaking through her mother thing if it actually went anywhere, but it really doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, it just, because like the other thing too is like, okay, are we supposed to believe that Alia is like, controlling her mother? Because that's another thing with this movie.
That was like
Lady
I was
Jessica
like internally reading it. Yeah, continue.
I was just gonna say, Jessica is the most diabolical I've ever seen her in this movie. Like, she straight up might be interpreted as a villain in this movie, which I've never seen her depicted that way in any other version I've seen, which, again, I'm okay with if it goes somewhere.
Yeah, it didn't really feel like that. And the thing is, like, she really wasn't. Like, the most that she wanted was just protection for her son, more than anything else. And that's kind of why she became Reverend Mother, is to protect her son. Like, she was never really evil, and she never supported, really, the Holy War. Not in, like, the full extent. Like, if anything, she left Arrakis because of her shame. Her shame for what happened.
Right, exactly.
And so... In future books, obviously. So it really feels strange, like, they play her like that. And also, like, the whole thing about, you were talking about how it feels like Alia was controlling Jessica. That's how I was feeling, too. And I was like, that's really weird. I don't know if I like this direction they're going with Alia, because it doesn't really feel like Alia. Like, yes, Alia becomes a lot worse as time progresses and she gets corrupted by power, but a lot of that was her just trying to fill in the void that her brother left when he disappeared, and so she felt like she had to make herself the Kwisatz Haderach and would do anything to, like, get the same level of prescience as he had.
Yeah, it builds it up. Like, that's one of the things I kind of liked about the Children of Dune series, is that we got to see Alia change over time. The series did not do a very good job at portraying that, but I like the idea. Like, I want to see that. Whereas, like, here, she's already kind of villainous. It's like, okay, where is she supposed to go from here in Dune 3? Like, that you're building up, that I'm assuming she's going to play a bigger part in, It's like, okay, I don't know. Like, yeah, again, maybe they're saving it for Dune 3, which, again, brings us back to square one. It's like, okay, the point of Dune 2 is it's supposed to be, giving us answers, and that we have a satisfying ending here. But again, we're back to square one. I'm no more
feels
satisfied.
This feels like a middle movie to an overall trilogy when it has been marketed as a conclusion.
Yeah.
So that is
point. Yeah.
something that I don't know how I don't really like that very much.
Yeah.
I like either they should have like just either Villeneuve shouldn't have taken a fucking break and just went ahead with Messiah so that we didn't have to wait like 3-4 fucking years for the next part.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we kind of had to do that with like Dune 2021, but also in all due fairness, part 2 wasn't even greenlit. So like that made sense. In this case, like Dune was like a determined moneymaker. Like they knew like part 2 was going to do well and that a part 3 would also do well. Yeah. So I don't see why they felt the need to market Dune Part 2 as like the final part.
Yeah. And again, Dune Part 1 ended in a way that I felt satisfied. I'm not satisfied with the way this movie ends at all. Like I still love the sequences that I love, but I'm definitely not as like, oh, this is the greatest sci-fi movie ever made as a lot of other people are. Like, I'm very critical of some of these changes. Maybe I'll grow to love some of them throughout, and maybe Dune 3 will come out and I'll be like, oh, this ended up working out in the long run.
Yeah,
but the last time I watched a singular version of Dune Messiah was the very first episode of Children of Dune, and it didn't go so well. So
yeah, well,
I'm highly
that's
skeptical.
because they did a terrible job at adapting it.
Yeah.
Dune, a lot of the issues with the adaptation of Dune Messiah in the Children of Dune miniseries is simply because Dune Messiah is a lot of talking. Yeah. And so they decided to shove in a bunch of shit from Children of Dune and then keep kind of some of the bare bone most exciting parts of Dune Messiah. So if they adapt Dune Messiah, it's going to be interesting how they tackle it. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of it is like talking in boardroom meetings and shit like that. There are some exciting things that happen, but like the Holy War that's talked about is mostly like the backdrop of Dune Messiah. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing with it. But I do have faith that they'll do a good job just because Villeneuve in general at least understands the books and has a deep, clear love and respect for them. Right. That I feel like, if anything, it'll be an adaptation that is actually like at the very least good, but not perfect.
Right. I don't want another Hobbit and the Battle of the Five Armies where we're stretching out the last 10 minutes into a 2.5 hour long film, you know? Yeah.
That's not Messiah.
That's worst case scenario. That's worst case scenario. Yeah. So, yeah. Again, I think a lot of my issues for this movie are purely personal. Like, I think overall it achieves a lot in terms of, I think the visuals in this movie and the music and the acting prop it up a lot more. Like, so that's why like I gave it like the 4-star, because holy shit,
that's completely
like, that stuff is just amazing. Like, again, the black and white Geety Prime sequence, like, could have been 4-star, could have been the reason I gave this 4 stars alone. It was that good. Like, so again, like I've said, this is definitely like other versions of Dune where it's going to take me multiple watch throughs to truly come to a conclusion with it, because that's what happened with all these other versions of Dune. The very first time I watched through Dune 1984, I hated it and like swore off all things Dune. I'm like, I'm never watching anything Dune related ever again. This was a piece of shit. This is one of the worst things I ever saw. But I decided to revisit it before Dune 2021, and I got a lot more ironic value out of it. And then, you know, through watching it over and over, I've grown to love it as like this ironic masterpiece. Whereas like Dune 2021, I watched it, I immediately fell in love with it. And then I watched it again and again, and I was able to like kind of come to a better conclusion of, it's not perfect, but I think it's really, 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 really good. Same thing with the miniseries. I watched it once, liked it. I've watched it a second time. I liked it a lot more. So I think it's the same thing with Dune Part 2. I watched it. I loved it. I have some issues here and there. Maybe those issues will either go away, be more prominent. I don't know. I can't tell. I'm not Paul Atreides. I can't see into the future.
Yeah, I feel like in my case, that's gonna be how it is for Dune Part Two as well, where it's gonna take me multiple watches to fully solidify how I feel about it. And even then, I don't think until the adaptation of Messiah comes out, will be fully able to understand my feelings towards it as an overall package. Because again, throwing the book away, throwing the book out the window, this is an incredible movie. Like, my issues with it are just purely, like, these are changes that they did that I'm not sold on. Right. I think they're interesting, but the movie hasn't sold them to me yet. And maybe watching it in a better environment, or, like, and streaming at some point, like, subtitles, anything like that, like, to help me gain a better appreciation for it, will probably it'll probably end up increasing it to a 4 at some point, I'm sure. I just haven't, as a fan of the books, as someone who has been intensely not hyper fixated, but had an intense special interest over the course of last year, where I watched, dear God, I've watched the Lynch Dune twice, I watched the miniseries 3 or 4 times at the very least. I watched the Dune Part 1 3 times. Like, I have watched Dune so fucking much. And so...
I'm sure you're going to watch them all a million more times.
Oh, absolutely. I'm probably going to actually reread the book.
Yeah.
And so, like, as someone who, like, loves this book and loves the series, I just, going into it, I just felt viscerally disappointed.
Well, even though
this wasn't what I expected.
Yeah, even though this is going to be one of the final Dune episodes we ever do. I mean, eventually we'll probably do Dune 3 when it eventually comes out, if it eventually comes out. But for a while, this will probably be the last one. Dune's not going to go away. Like, you know, like, we're always going to be revisiting and remembering these movies and miniseries, because there's just a lot to them. Like,
exactly. Like,
and I'm glad
it's a story you can always, like, revisit. Like, it's just a classic tale. I would almost say biblical in scale in its own right. Like,
I think so, yeah.
But yeah, continue.
I was just going to say, I'm glad you introduced me further into this franchise, like, this whole world. Like, I feel like had I not watched the miniseries, I wouldn't have a greater appreciation for Dune than I do now. Like, I feel like I definitely appreciate it a lot more. I certainly do not understand it. Like I just said in this episode, I didn't know Dr. Kynes was Shawnee's father, and I didn't know that they were technically Harkonnen. Like, I still never picked up on that until now. So clearly, there's plenty of other things I still don't know about this world. So, but I think I do get a better appreciation for it than when I first started, like, the first episode we ever did where we talked about the Lynch film. Like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do, actually. I know what you mean, because, again, it's very dense, and I remember when I watched Dune Part 1, like, a while ago, it was before I read the books, and I hadn't seen the miniseries in, like, years. So I ended up feeling almost a little lost at points when I was watching it, because of how dense it was and how fast-paced it was.
Yeah.
But the more that I go back and I rewatch it, like, the more it made more sense. Yeah. So, I feel like it's just because of how dense it is. There's just always something new, something different that you learn and pick up on and discover. And that's kind of why I love Dune. It feels like that's like, as I said earlier, my girlfriend jokes that I'm addicted to rewatching Dune, but can you blame me when it's so dense and jam-packed of all these ideas and philosophical musings and explorations of the nature of humanity and religion and politics, which is something... Okay, the combination of religion in politics and how it is used as a political tool is something that has fascinated me for quite some time in anthropological fashion. And so, like, seeing it explored so well here in Dune is definitely, like, the biggest attribute to why I absolutely adore Dune. As well as its timeliness, its cautions against like charismatic figures and needing to like remind people to question authority, to always like not take things blindly, like
Absolutely.
like to think for yourself, and to make sure that you just like don't get easily swept up
Yeah.
into things, because it's something that we really need right now.
Yeah.
Like, considering the rise of fascism, especially Christo-fascism in the US, like, it just feels all the more timely. And, like, this is the perfect time for a Dune adaptation to come out.
Yeah. And even on a smaller scale, by saying not getting swept up in the hype of Dune 2, like, if you have issues with the movie, like, actually
don't be afraid to talk about it.
Don't be afraid. Yeah, we're not afraid.
Yeah, like,
fear is the mind killer.
Fear is the mind killer.
So
exactly, like, don't like keep your mind open. Obviously, listen to opposing things. Like, even when there's something that I don't like, I will usually try to give opposing things a chance to understand. And the same for if someone's saying something negative about something I do like. I'll like listen to them, and I'll be like either convinced or I won't be convinced, but that's just how it is. Like, that's the nature of art. Like, in general, art is how you perceive it. So, like, if you loved Dune Part 2 and you read the books and you're like, yeah, I love these changes, good for you. I am so happy that you adore this movie. I am so glad. For me, it didn't win me over as much as I would have liked. And for someone who hasn't read the books and liked it, like, read the book. Please read the book. Oh my god. I get it. Reading is hard. The book can be dry at times, but it's so worth it. It's so worth reading the books. Like, audiobooks are your friend, in my case, at least.
Oh yeah, I think if anything, like, I'm like I said, I'm definitely more likely to read the book now than I ever have. Because I feel
yes.
Yeah, I feel like I do need that other experience, that like you have been saying, that grounded experience, like where these stories actually came from, the original story, like the original
Too Many
book.
Movies Part 4, where we talk about the book.
I mean, hey, I'm not. We've talked about miniseries and TV shows on this podcast that's called Too Many Movies. I mean, I'm a bit of a hack fraud at this point. I'll just keep pushing it.
The exception to round out all the Dunes.
Yeah. Just talking about the book. I mean, hey, why not? Well, is there anything else to say about Dune Part 2?
I think I've basically said everything that I've wanted to say about it. Like, it's a very solid overall package. It just didn't deliver for me personally.
Yeah, and I pretty much there with you. I think I do love the stuff a little more. I get a little more out of it, but I do agree with the changes that you're not that much of a fan of. I'm also not that much of a fan of. Again, maybe they'll grow on me. Maybe Dune Messiah will make it all, like, make the whole vision seem clearer, but I'm not there yet. But on its own, I think it's a very, very, very good film, and so far my favorite film of 2024, which, the other 2024
let's be real. Like,
are...
the only worthy contestant to Dune 2 at this point is Madame Web, obviously. So,
well, I haven't seen Madame Web yet. I know it's going to overtake Dune Part 2 because it's Madame Web. I'm just saying the only other movies I've seen this year are the Mean Girls remake and Argyle, which...
yeah, that's like not even close.
Yeah, it's not even close. Of course, it's going to be Dune Part 2.
True cinema started with Madame Web, but truer cinema started with Dune Part 2.
Of course, yeah. Soon Madame Web will overtake 2024. I know that's what's going to happen. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I'll get to it, I'm sure. So, but anyway, I guess to round things off, I'm absolutely going to get Dune Part 2 on Blu-ray when it eventually comes out, because I said earlier that this Dune Part 1 comes with like this cardboard box that like the Blu-ray is also in, just to like keep it contained in the pain box, but it's separated by like a piece of cardboard, so you can put like 2 Blu-rays in here. So I'm thinking I'll have one slot for the Part 1 Blu-ray, and then the Part 2 Blu-ray will go in the other slot. So
ooh, that would be nice.
yeah, so that's the plan. I assume you would want would you want Part 2 on Blu-ray eventually?
Yeah, dude, I would own every version of Dune on Blu-ray. Like,
there
even
you go.
the Children of Dune miniseries. Like, I am that autistic, so.
Perfect. There you go. Awesome. All right then. I guess that just about does it. Puff.
Yeah.
Why don't you shout out your stuff? Where can people find you?
Alright, so you can find me on Twitter at OneToughPuff. I also have a channel where I make music called One Tough Puff, as well as a SoundCloud that also has said music. So, I know, what? The person talking about movies makes music? That's crazy, right?
That's
I'm sorry.
crazy.
But yeah, that's basically where you can find me, and yeah, that's my stuff. That's all I can really think of.
Yeah, all your links will be in the description as per usual. They've been here before, but just always good to plug things at the very end, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on today to talk about the final Dune episode for a while.
Feels like the end of an era almost.
It is the end of an era, but someday Dune Messiah will come out, and that's when I'll post the Dune Yomo cut. That's when I'll post the Dune Yomo cut.
Yeah.
Remind me in a couple of years when Dune Messiah comes out to do that. I'll do the Dune Yomo cut.
Let's go.
Yeah. So. But again, thanks so much for coming on to talk about these movies. I'm so glad we got to talk about them today.
Yeah, I'm honestly glad that I have an outlet to just info dump about Dune. Like, you gave me that, and I appreciate that.
Of course. And thank you, the listener, for listening to today's episode. If you want to support the show, give a like, give a comment. Listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or on YouTube. That's fine too. It doesn't matter. Yeah, thanks for watching, and now if you'll excuse me, Puff, because I have the pain box with me here, I'm going to test this out, see if I actually do feel any pain in this one. Ah!